So tonight's speaker is one Mr. David Guirl. You've obviously been hearing him already.
Yeah.
What are you? You're a SEC admin for SC DMV apparently.
I interchange different titles, but sure, that's my title for this presentation.
That'll work.
Sometimes I'm a manager, sometimes I'm an administrator. Depends on what I'm doing for the given day.
Appropriate hat for the moment.
Exactly. Many hats. I've been with ColaSec for many years. They've been gracious enough to have me and put up with me. I'm also raising money for the Alzheimer's Association. This is my 5th year doing a 252-mile bike ride. If you want to donate, please do. I'd really appreciate it. It's for a good cause. That's where most of my pictures and social media come from, as I'm sure you're aware. I'm raising, my goal is $1,555 since it's my 5th year riding, just as a fun little gimmick. But it's a good cause. It goes to research and development, all that good stuff for Alzheimer's. There is no cure, unfortunately. So it's more about care and improving the life that people have when they do get diagnosed, improving care while they're dealing with the disease. So it's troubling stuff, but it's really important. So that's what I do. We will talk about tonight securing all the things, primarily in a Microsoft environment, looking at Kerberos, looking at LDAP, and looking at DNS, and trying to secure your internal systems from all these old legacy protocols that Microsoft still supports. Some of them are 20+ years old. Some of them are 30+ years old. They've been around since the NT days. So it's frustrating as an administrator, which I know a lot of people in this room are, that not only are these things all enabled by default, but when you go and look at the logs on your domain controllers, you notice that, holy crap, all this stuff is still in use. We can't just flip a switch and turn it on. So to migrate to secure versions of these protocols is really difficult. So that's what we'll talk about here after the intermission.
Intermission? You think we're going to have an intermission? No. Straight into the fire with you.
The opportunity for everybody to go refill their beer.
No, that's important because I'm working on finishing my 2 here. So
I'm going to give a quick shout out to our sponsors there, Adam.
Yes, indeed. The USC Columbia Technology Incubator has been hosting us for a number of years. They are presently closed, from what I understand. All the USC buildings are shut down, and Woody Octopus Vapors has been a gracious host for us for God, how long has it been now? A good long while for Battlegrounds. Yeah, it's been a couple of years, but unfortunately, due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, Woody Octopus Vapors is going to be going out of business here in the next month. I was hoping to do a bigger event to celebrate their closing. Not celebrate, but at least give them a little bump on the way out. Unfortunately, the impending plague has had other plans. So while we're on the subject of hard times for businesses, if you have anything you can do to sling a little cash at your local small businesses, they're about to go through a really hellish time. Regardless of how bad the sickness gets here, just the fact that all the businesses are closing is going to make it really, really difficult for them to do things like pay their rent and keep the lights on. And a number of business closings may result from, and probably will result from, everything that's happening. So anything you can do to help them weather the storm, I promise you will be appreciated and go a long way toward making sure that this isn't a total wipeout for small businesses in your area. The other thing I will say is that if you're doing shopping on Amazon, you can go and tag the Harvest Hope Food Bank as your preferred charity. Amazon does a thing with I think they call the program Smile, Amazon Smile, where 5% of whatever you buy gets donated to the charity of your choice. Harvest Hope Food Bank here in the Midlands is a really good choice. Does a lot of good feeding needy families. So anything you can do, anything you can spare right now, goes a long way. So that's all I've got for the moment. Guys, you got anything else?
None for me.
All right, cool. Let's take a couple-minute break. I'm going to throw some lasagna in the microwave, and we'll come back. And then, David, you're out of time, buddy.
All right, guys. Welcome to this wonderful St. Patrick's Day. I know everyone kind of forgot. So hope you're drinking something green or wearing something green. Tonight we're going to talk about securing all of the things, specifically Kerberos, LDAP, and DNS. Specifically about Microsoft protocols, this is the definition that we like to talk about. It's an oxymoron, figure of speech in which apparently contradictory terms appear in conjunction. Microsoft has forever been using insecure things forever. And so it's a huge problem to try and make them more secure, but we're going to try. A little bit about me. I already mentioned the Alzheimer's ride. It's called the Ride to Remember. I generally consider myself an overpaid babysitter, but I disagree with the if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if you want to hit me on Twitter or LinkedIn, I generally don't check them, but if you want to come find me, then have fun. This is my fourth presentation for ColaSec in the last couple of years. Myself and another coworker, previous coworker, Trey, presented Microsoft's local admin password solution. That is still up and running and flawless. It's been incredible. If you have a problem with lateral movement, somebody attacking, somebody getting the hash or the clear text password of a local admin account, and that local admin is the same username and password on every computer, LDAPS will fix that. So check that out or check out that presentation. I also did kind of a secure all the things for PKI. We're still in the early phases of that because other priorities have gotten in the way. And then I think it was last year or maybe late 2018, myself and my coworker T did a presentation about securing, patching Microsoft systems, primarily Windows servers and workstations, and how to get all your Microsoft stuff deployed within 7 to 10 days. We've been running that. It's probably 4 or 5 years now. We've been running that on Patch Tuesday. We start and we're done by the following Tuesday. We're about 98% patched. So been working flawless for years. So I highly recommend it if you are having problems keeping things patched. Check out that presentation. It should be up on the YouTube and all that good stuff. So these are just some common application layer protocols that are typical in a Windows environment. You've got Kerberos for authentication. You've got, of course, name resolution so that your computers can talk to each other using names for DNS. You've got to get directory information for those computers and users and printers and all the stuff that's in Active Directory. So we use LDAP for that. Email, we're not going to talk about tonight, but everybody's pretty familiar with that. World Wide Web, of course. Can't forget about the World Wide Web. Most of everything on the internet is encrypted these days. If it's not, it's just content based and doesn't really need to be encrypted. File transfer is another one that a lot of people, especially in the Windows and Microsoft world, have a problem with. A lot of SFTP, it requires additional software or additional configuration. Again, we're not going to talk about it tonight, but worth checking out if you have an FTP server you want to get rid of. It's
why are we going to talk about it tonight?
Because you know what? I see what you did there. And then also SMB has been in the news a lot. Of course, switching from getting rid of V1. If you haven't done that already, you should not be watching this presentation. You should be going and turning that off because SMB1 is horrific.
But it'll break that one XP machine we have.
Oh, God. Throw that XP machine in the garbage. So this was a cute little template that was actually included in the original template that I just decided to put some words in. But obviously the hardest part about all this kind of stuff is configuring the clients and applications and firewalls and everything else that uses these protocols and hits your Active Directory environment. For a long time, we used to promote the fact that, oh yeah, we use Active Directory for everything. We don't have this random radius server over here. We don't have local accounts running this other thing over here. We're using everything in Active Directory. Well, that's great, but it doesn't mean everything is secure and wonderful. It means you've got one point, one central point for configuration and management, which is good, but it doesn't mean it's secure. So our focus tonight primarily will be around the assumed breach model. If anyone's ever done a pen test, especially on your internal network, they drop a box on your network, give it an IP address and walk away, and then they just turn on Kali Linux and hit everything and see what happens. I guarantee they're gonna get domain admin, and you're not gonna have well, you'll still have a job, but you'll have a lot of work to do. So we want to reduce the attack surface. We want to reduce the opportunities and protocols that they can take advantage of as much as possible. So we're really going to focus on internal domain traffic between Windows clients and servers. And we're going to try to talk about how to implement them. They're not always easy. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get into enough detail to be able to explain, step by step. But I've got a lot of reference data in here that you can go back and look at that will give you the step by step on how to do it, especially in the test lab, and then you can roll it out to production.
Hey, David.
Hey.
As you're doing all that, what kind of log monitoring are you doing?
Most logging can actually be done through Windows Event Log on the domain controllers. And I'll talk about, I'm glad you brought that up. I will talk about that for each protocol. There's LDAP just changed a lot of that with this March update that Microsoft released. And there's other event logs you can use for each protocol that we'll talk about.
So are you looking at that on the domain controller, or are you forwarding that to some SIM or other log aggregation source?
Currently, we're looking at just at the domain controllers. I'll show you a fancy little way to get it off the domain controller easily and then into a readable format, so you're not clicking, line by line through an event log, or doing because Windows Event Log Reader is really, really horrible. So you got to get it out of there and into some kind of usable format. But personally, we don't use a SIM. But you could do either a SIM, or you could just set up event log forwarding on each of your domain controllers and have it forward the event IDs that we're going to talk about to a log server, and then you could analyze there, and that way it reduces all the noise of every other event that's going on, and you can focus just on the events you want.
Awesome.
And just to keep things in the Microsoft shop for those in the class that actually want to do that, Microsoft does offer a Windows Event Log aggregation service on Windows Server, and you can funnel all of that into that box. And then PowerShell has a lot of tools for parsing Windows event logs. So that's a way to go if you're interested in such things.
Nice. So if you're a Rick and Morty fan, if you've watched the recent, the current season, I won't give any spoilers away, but like we said, you want to assume breach when you're a security administrator and not leave anything to question. So first thing we're going to talk about is Kerberos, and generally, how Windows computers authenticate with each other. Many years of protocols that Microsoft supported, LM, which is LAN Manager, NTLM, NTLM version 2, and Kerberos. I hope I put it in here. Yeah, so Kerberos was starting to replace NTLM in Windows 2000. And yes, Kerberos is the default today. As you'll see in a minute, NTLM is still supported by default. It's still on by default in a Windows environment. NTLM doesn't have any mutual authentication, so it's just have fun. Again, you've got to assume breach. You can't keep thinking, oh, we've got this hard outer shell, we've got this perimeter firewall, and all these perimeter, monitoring systems. Forget all that. You've got to assume breach and figure that the soft GUI inside of your network is going to get crawled, and people are going to put bad things in your network through a user clicking on an email or something worse. So we try to. The goal is to try to get rid of this. NTLM is actually fairly decent to get rid of. So generally today, if you've got a Active Directory network, you probably have this set. This is a group policy to basically say, okay, Kerberos is great, we're using Kerberos, but what are we going to do if Kerberos fails or if I can't negotiate Kerberos? This goes from top to bottom, least restrictive to most restrictive. So the bottom is the most preferred if you're still going to support NTLM version 2 only. So basically what that last option there would say, basically if Kerberos fails, only support NTLM version 2 and then refuse LM and NTLM version 1. You've got to look in your environment and see what you're doing now. Hopefully, if you're running Windows 10 and also Windows 8, I can't remember what the default is for Windows 7, but I know Windows 7 does support Windows NTLM version 2. I just don't know what the default is. You might have to install something to get it. But for this talk, in general, we're only talking about supported operating systems. We're not talking about Windows 7. We're not talking about Windows XP. I don't care about any of that crap. We're focusing on Windows 10, Server 2012 and up for most of this. So this is probably what you have set now. We're going to try to take that a step further. So your basic Kerberos, yes, this is 2020, and Bob here on the left has a bit of a feminine side, but she's going to request a ticket granting ticket against your domain controller. It will respond with that ticket granting ticket and compare the hashes. And then once you're all authenticated, it's going to send that ticket to the server that you're trying to get to, whether it's file server, a web server, or SharePoint, or whatever it is. So it works great with one server. Kerberos is pretty simple. But where it breaks down generally is, my slide's out of order here. You want to have, if you've got a web server that's got a database backend, you're going to end up in a situation where you've got a double hop. So to be able to authenticate to that web server, your going to also have to authenticate to the SQL database. Well, typically with a web server, you're going to have an IIS application pool that is connected into, has credentials that will authenticate to the database. So you've actually got to set up a mutual trust using an SPN, which is a service principal name, so that these service accounts trust each other on the network and can act upon that user, so that the entire chain from the client to the web server all the way through the database is using Kerberos. And I go back to this other slide here. Kerberos isn't perfect. It's the best we have. But there's still, I think his name is Matt, what's the famous guy on Twitter? Not Matt Graber, Matt Groening, but anyway, there's one of the guys that, big security guys on Twitter.
The Google pen tester?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay.
That one guy on Twitter that.
No, it is Matt Graber. Okay, sorry. Yeah, Matt Graber. I was getting confused with Matt Groening from The Simpsons. Matt Graber. Easily confused.
Sure.
I could see The Simpsons doing an episode on golden tickets.
God.
That's a whole nother.
To the narrowest market possible.
No one's watching The Simpsons anyway, so it won't matter. So yes, Kerberos is susceptible. It's not this brilliant thing that again, it was invented in frickin' Windows 2000, and we're still using it, and it's still the best we have in the Microsoft world. Where was I? I thought I skipped one. Okay, so Kerberos, the tricky part is as far as an implementation standpoint, and this document goes a lot in detail about how to do this to fix the double hop and make sure that your authentication with Kerberos. What we decided in our environment, SQL itself attempts to go out and register its own SPN when it starts SQL. And so instead of trying to manually manage all these different SQL servers all across the environment, there's a group policy you can configure here. Now, this is a security concern. So this is security over convenience, or that's backwards. This is convenience over security, where you're allowing basically all of your SQL servers the right that's required to assign their own SPN. So there's a bit of a give and take there, but from an administration standpoint, it made sense for us to not have to manually do this every time we want to build a new server or add a new web server to our environment. So in IIS, it's pretty simple to do. Unfortunately, it's not the default. The default allows anonymous access to your web server so that you can make sure you can connect to it willy-nilly and not have any problems testing out your new little whiz-bang gadget that you created. But what you want to do is actually go in and to the authentication settings in IIS, disable all the anonymous ASP.NET garbage, select Windows authentication, because lo and behold, the default, even in Server 2016, the default Windows authentication in the list of providers here, the default as far as priority is NTLM. This screenshot is what is recommended to change that and actually negotiate up. But the default is NTLM. So again, 2016 server, even I had to check 2019 server, Windows 10, 2016, the default is still NTLM, not Kerberos. So it's maddening to me that as administrators, we have to go in and manually do this stuff. There's no automatic magic way to do this and say, hey, set all my IIS servers in the environment to use negotiators. Well, first you'll break everything, but so I'm kind of glad there's not a setting for that. But also, unless you're manually doing all this, it's
How do you
really
bring down an entire company with one GPO?
well, there goes the environment. Oh well. But this is what you want to set in your IIS server. What is next here? What did I do? Oh yeah. And that's easy in a Windows environment. The hard part is everything else. And we're not getting into details here, but trying to get all the old stuff, non-Windows stuff, especially to use Kerberos, is that much more difficult. You know, if you've got a network appliance, if you've got, let's say you just want to, like Nessus, for example, you have Nessus to scan all your environment. Great, how secure you are. Oh, wonderful, you're seeing all the vulnerabilities you have. Well, you're not using Kerberos to authenticate into Nessus. You're using NTLM. Congratulations. So you are now using an insecure protocol to authenticate to a secure system. So if you want to enforce Kerberos, here are these steps to do so. First, you need to turn on auditing so that you can audit, and this goes to Jeff's question earlier, audit all the NTLM traffic. You have to turn that on because, again, that's not the default to audit all that traffic. There's two settings, actually.
Whoa, hold on.
Huh?
Fun fact, doesn't that generate a ton of volume on your logging?
Just a teensy-weensy bit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Just turn it on, it's fine. Well, so it depends. There are other configurations you can set elsewhere to roll over those logs, or what Jeff was saying earlier, dump them out to some, auxiliary box, and so you're not having to, fill up your domain controller, C drive.
There you go. That's where I was heading with that. Having suffered the pain of accidentally filling up the disk on a local server by writing logs, go and follow up on that and make sure when you turn that on, you're not accidentally going to log 6 gigs worth of NTLM authentication logs that you're never going to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. Our default rollover, I think, is like 1 gig. It'll keep 1 gig of logs before it rolls them over, which is not even a full day, but it's enough for our event logging system to read them and ingest them before they get gobbled up and rolled over. But yeah, so that's how I put
question out there.
I'm sorry?
What happens to an XP machine when you hit disk capacity because of logging?
I'm not answering that question. That's not a valid question.
Because it's XP?
It's Windows XP.
You'd be surprised.
Mackenzie, you're not running a valid configuration. And if you are running Windows XP, I'm concerned. So that's kind of why I put a estimated time of delivery of 2 to 5 years to really get to this point. We're about 2 years into this, so we're on the home stretch. So once you enable all the auditing, and if you've done this already, a lot of STIG and other things require auditing of all this traffic anyway. So you may already have the auditing turned on. Then you need to go get the logs, manually review them, collect the IP address information. Then you need
can help there.
Yeah. So that's where it goes back to the other GPO I was talking about, where you want to set your GPO to the most restrictive, to where you're only using Kerberos and NTLM version 2. That's kind of your middle of the road. That's kind of where we're at now. Is we don't have NTLM v1 or LM, but we do still allow NTLM v2. And you will probably break stuff when you do that. But if you review your logs properly, you'll know whether or not what's going to break. And if you need to take that to management and say, hey, this is going to break stuff, but this, Mackenzie over here is running an old Windows XP machine and he's still using NTLM. And do we care about him? No. So cut him off. Let's use NTLM version 2. So run some reverse lookups and get an idea of what these systems are that are still running NTLM version 2. Review your internal documentation. Haha. Good luck finding it. Figure out where all these systems are, what they are, who owns them, and then number 9 is a very, very simple. Just modify every single system in your environment to use Kerberos. And then I did find this. I didn't know this before researching for this presentation, but there is a way to actually enforce Kerberos completely. I'm misremembering this. So the last step here is restrict NTLM and do a deny all, so that you're 100% Kerberos. Any NTLM will be completely denied, and you will break so much stuff it'll be glorious. So
my experience with stuff like that is step 11, you'll have about 7 stops and starts going back, and we think we're ready. No, we're really not. We think we're ready. No, we're really not. Maybe about round 7, you'll get to where you're actually ready.
Right. Yeah, we're going. No, we're not going. To make step 3 a little bit easier to go and get those logs, PowerShell is a wonderful tool to query your domain controllers and get event log based on date range. Gather up the computer name for your domain controllers, and then get the actual event ID that you need, 4624, and then dump that out to a file with the relevant information, the machine name, the time, all that wonderful stuff, and then dump that to your local machine, and then you can review it easily without having to sit on Windows Event Manager and poke through one by one. Oh yeah, okay. I was remembering this correctly. So step 10, if you truly have to have exceptions where you say, okay, we know we've got this legacy thing, this Mackenzie's Windows XP machine, we have to keep it on because it's running the entire environment. You can set exceptions in here for server names, fully qualified or just regular server names, to say, hey, these servers are allowed to use NTLM, and that will significantly reduce your attack surface to say, hey, 99.999% of our stuff is using Kerberos. Only these 2 servers are using NTLM, and that's a huge win. If you can even get that far, that's a huge win. So that's the goal. If you can even get there, good luck, Godspeed. Yeah. Next is new to me and possibly new to a lot of folks in the news recently from Microsoft is LDAP over SSL. It's not new to the world, but it's new to Microsoft apparently. So LDAP has been supported for years. It's not invented by LDAP, it's not invented by Microsoft, but it is standard open protocol. And so they do support LDAPS, and they're fairly different. LDAPS is going to use certificates, sort of like HTTPS or general SSL traffic, as opposed to just being wide open, unauthenticated. So it's going to use a standard certificate to prove the sender and the recipient before the traffic is actually any packet payload is transferred. So it's vendor neutral. LDAP has been around forever. And Microsoft, it was probably in 2019, but there was an update that came out this month, actually, in March last week for Patch Tuesday, that Microsoft decided, hey, we're finally going to start doing something about this.
Did
The
that
tricky
change
part,
any communication ports?
I'm sorry?
Did that change any communication ports for the services?
Yes. So one of my early slides, don't make me click all the way back there.
No, all the way back.
All
Start
the
over.
way back. Here we go. Whee! Where are we? Yes. So LDAP is 389. LDAP-S is 636.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. And I also put most secure on here for all those hecklers that want to tell me that Kerberos is not secure and all this fun stuff. So this is the most secure version that we have. Whee! All right, so in 2020, we're going to decide, hey, we need to do this. And originally, Microsoft was going to make it the default, like, really, really quick, like this March. And of course, the community decided, no, that's way too fast. We can't do this. It's been 20 years. We don't have time for that. The difficult part is you have to have certificate authority because you've got to issue a certificate to your domain controllers before they can do this mutual auth, because they've got to have, whoops, where did I go? They've got to have a certificate on the client and the server to establish that connection. So it's similar to if you have a website out on the interwebs, you have to have a SSL certificate to be able to validate your identity and prove who you are. The same thing requires if you're going to do SSL with LDAP. So it makes sense. It's just annoying. Luckily, in my environment, we just built a certificate authority about a year and a half ago, which is the presentation I did about a year and a half ago. So it's not impossible. There's documentation, tons of forums and blogs about how to build a certificate authority the wrong way. Most of them just say, hey, grab a server, click, next, install certificate services on, hey, do it on your domain controller, who cares? That's not a good way to do it. There is a right way to do it, and I won't go into that here, but you want to have a offline root certificate authority so that your private key is not on a VM running in your data center. But we won't get into the details of that. But
to interrupt you just a little bit, I will say if anybody is interested in that being a topic for a future talk, I would be happy to drag Corey into helping me put that together, because we have done that in the past. I will also say that if you deploy a certificate authority within your own Active Directory environment, that also enables you to deploy things like IPsec encryption between your endpoints and all of your file servers. So like literally all of your network traffic, all of your SMB traffic, all of your RDP traffic, everything can be tunneled over IPsec. And at that point, your internal network is hardened to the point that everything is basically riding over a micro VPN to its endpoint. And if somebody is listening in, if somebody has root access on a switch and is capturing all of your packets, you don't give a damn because all they're capturing is encrypted traffic anyway. So there are a ton of knock-on positive effects. If you make this work, you open up an entire universe of other hardening things you can do for your internal network. Anyway, David, sorry.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I just finished
Never mind, David. Jeff's got it.
a SANS class this past week, and we spent an entire day on zero trust networks, and IPsec in a Windows environment is basically the way to implement zero trust networks in that with those types of devices. So
It makes the attacker's job much harder.
Oh yeah.
I've already forgotten everything that I didn't know about that, by the way. So
Don't worry, I'll beat you until you remember.
Yeah, so I did do a presentation for that. Let's see if this will work.
Oh shit.
That was 2018. Yeah, late 2018. We talked about it. It's been a long time, but yeah, we can definitely review that again if anyone's interested. Because it is important. Because a certificate authority, like Adam said, it opens up so many opportunities to even just do SSL on. We were talking about IIS, websites, web servers in your environment earlier. So
all of your internal websites that throw a certificate warning whenever your users go to them, or whenever you go to the admin pages, you can make all of that go away.
Yeah, that Nessus server you're scanning all your systems with, you should probably have.
You didn't bother securing access to.
So yeah, I do plan. That presentation from back in the day was kind of a phase 0 about PKI, and so I'd be happy to commingle with you guys and do another presentation about encrypt everything. That's the goal. Encrypt everything. There's no reason you shouldn't. And all we have is time, especially since we're all working from home doing nothing. It's all the more reason to encrypt everything. So getting back to LDAP and LDAP-S, it is a little bit difficult to convert certain systems, again, similar to NTLM and getting off that old protocol. If you have a physical network appliance or some legacy third-party system that doesn't support LDAP-S, you're screwed. If they don't have the things that are required to read the certificates off the local server and send them over when they're doing that LDAP query, you don't have a lot of choice. But if you can do it, and of course in a Windows environment, Windows 10 machine, Windows server, it's super simple. Once you get that certificate authority and all your certificates in place. I apologize that I don't totally understand yet because I'm still fairly new to this, the whole channel binding thing. But it's trying to bind TLS and the application layer together. I literally know no more than that. But there's a registry entry to turn it on. If anybody else does, pipe in. But it's part of this whole LDAP-S magic that we're doing here. So if you want to set the registry key, you can enforce LDAP channel binding, and the most probably the first step would be changing this D word to a value of 1 so it's enabled and supported, and then to enforce it, you would say change the D word to 2, where all clients have to provide channel binding information. Otherwise, the traffic will be rejected. So similarly related to that is LDAP signing, where again we're just using a SSL or a 509 certificate to sign the traffic that you're sending before you send it. So that's the basis of what we're doing here, and then verifying that what you're sending is and who you're sending it to hasn't been intercepted or man in the middle or any of that good stuff. So if you've gotten this far, you've got your certificate authority, you've issued your certificates to your domain controller, and you're ready to test, then all you need to do, you can either use the LDP tool, which is built into every Windows server since the dawn of time, literally, or you can do netstat if you want to look for traffic hitting port 636. You may have to wait a little bit while because you need an active connection to see that. So it's probably easier to use the tool and initiate your own connection. Or you can look for event ID 1220. And again, you can use that PowerShell script from earlier or something like it to go look for those event IDs, pull them back to your workstation, and actually, comb through them and find what you want. For us, because we already have a certificate authority, we've already issued certificates to our domain controller. There was nothing on the actual domain controller we had to quote unquote turn on to support this. So once you've got the basics in place, there's no role to install or anything else to say, hey, I want to do this now. It's enabled. So Microsoft.
Also, shout out to the Jerusalem Standard Time on that last slide.
Who? Oh.
Yeah.
Nice. I was pulling these from all over the internet, so who knows where they came from. So this month, again, Microsoft is finally getting on board in 2020, and so they're trying to make it a little bit easier for us. The update will actually allow a new diagnostic logging to be available under domain controllers. Currently, all there is that one event ID for 1220. But after you install this update on your domain controllers, you'll then also be able to see more detailed events for signing failures and channel binding failures on your domain controllers. So once you have all that information, again, use that PowerShell script, plug in these event IDs, and you'll be able to pull that back and find out where you're missing, whatever pieces and parts you've screwed up along the way while you're implementing and turning that stuff on, and identify systems that don't support any of these features, so you can go out and fix them, hopefully, or reach out to whoever manages them and can fix them. And this gets kind of super lame and annoying from Microsoft, but group it into if it's an appliance, is it running Windows, is it not running Windows? And so you try to help triage these different systems you've got to make the changing later. Because again, you've already got it enabled. The task now is to convert everything to use the LDAPS, and now you can actually enforce it once you get everything converted over. And blah, 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 more garbage from Microsoft. And this is, I know, a bit of a confusion in my own slides, partly because I had finished writing this about 12 minutes before we started broadcasting, but also because I kept getting different information. And again, because this is fairly new in the Microsoft world, your domain controllers do have self-signed certificates. So I did read 2 different blogs that said you can use this using the existing self-signed certificates. You don't have to have a certificate authority. And then the Microsoft article and the recommended best practices, you have to have a certificate authority. So I don't know yet if it's truly required to have that, or if it's just recommended and great. But
I will chime in here real quick and say that it is technically plausible to make it work without PKI. But do yourself a favor and just do the hard work of figuring out how to make PKI work up front, because it's easier to do it that way. I fought like hell to make IPsec work with self-signed certs, and it is a pain in the ass. Massive pain in the ass. And it's a massive pain in the ass for every client you set it up on. So if you've got an environment with more than 12 machines, just PKI is the way to go.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's definitely recommended and preferred, but I don't know if it's truly required. But you're right. It may just make your life a living hell.
From a technical feasibility standpoint, I would say the math makes it required. You can set it up by all means, knock yourself stupid, but
yeah, exactly. Good luck. This stuff is hard enough as it is to implement across your entire enterprise. Good luck doing it, with a carrot and a dull knife.
I was wondering where you were going with that.
So again, in a Windows environment, let's say you're running IIS. This is a very typical web config file for a .NET application running an IIS. This is something that is in our environment a lot. It's truly as simple as changing the port number here and forcing it or telling it to use LDAPS. It's really that simple. There's no real configuration that I could find for IIS, assuming you've got the certificate available on that server and available to use. So once you confirm everything, again, using those event IDs we just talked about and saying, okay, these servers are talking, now you can go and configure your web server to actually use that channel. So one other thing I ran into that I personally never heard of was SASL, which sounds like a cartoon character's name. What a lot easier to implement because you don't need a certificate authority, but it allows you to provide integrity and encryption to your LDAP communication today. So if you want to start there, there might be a good starting ground before you move into the building of a certificate authority and all that craziness that Adam's talking about. So hopefully there will be more information about LDAPS. It's pretty sparse right now, but once you get that March update installed on your domain controllers, hopefully it doesn't blue screen anything, and you'll get a lot more logging in detail about what is going on in your environment, and you can rectify it over the next 3 to 5 years.
I like that, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, especially in state government. I mean, you gotta set expectations clearly.
Clearly.
So the last one that I'll talk about is DNS, and unfortunately, this is the least fleshed out. So we've gone from really detailed to less and less detailed as we move through these. So I apologize. DNS, domain name resolution. Obviously, everybody knows what DNS is. Microsoft supported a bunch of it over the years. LLMNR, NetBIOS, DNS. DNSSEC is not technically name resolution. That's kind of a misnomer there, but it is able to be used for the DNS protocol. And then on the internet, this has gotten a lot more publicity lately, especially around your ISP privacy. People are worried about Google and your ISPs selling your DNS traffic to the highest bidder so that they can sell you more ads based on what you're browsing. Because if you go to if you do a standard DNS query for Facebook.com, yes, Facebook has a SSL certificate and it's encrypted. So everything you send in that encrypted tunnel to Facebook cannot be seen, but everybody, your ISP and everybody else, can see that you went to Facebook.com. And from an advertising and privacy perspective. That's all they need to know. All they need to know is you went to Facebook, or you went to, I don't know, name your product. You went to Sierra
Twitter,
Nevada.
Reddit.
Reddit. Did you say Reddit?
Yeah.
No, nobody goes to Reddit.
Okay.
Nobody can sell you a product revolving around Reddit. You know, if I'm researching a camera to purchase, I'm going to Forex and Ring and Wise and all these different brands, right? I'm researching them on Amazon, on Google, on just vendor manufacturer websites. So they'll take that data and see. They don't know what I searched for because they don't know what I sent to them because that traffic is encrypted. But the DNS query itself is easily seen. So what we want to do on the internet is to encrypt the actual query so that no one is knowing what names, what domain names we're querying. But on the inside, the same can apply, especially when you want to prevent spoofing and other attacks where you're either downplaying or injecting into that DNS query. Because it's not encrypted, they can inject it, they can man in the middle, they can do all kind of wonderful things. If you assume breach, they're already in the network, they're just watching your traffic and try to hijack it or learn something from it. So DNSSEC can provide authentication, but not encryption. So it's not the full picture. And then the HTTPS, obviously, just like SSL on the internet, can provide the encryption piece.
So one thing about the HTTPS, from my understanding, if you have a computer that is domain joined, it is disabled in Firefox, because I think Firefox is the browser that has enabled it at this point. And that's because you have to be able to get to your service names, all those service records that you have in DNS, and so they disable it at that point.
Yeah, I haven't looked into browser configs. I know Firefox, are they requiring, or are they just supporting it to be enabled manually?
I think right now everything's mixed. I think they're enabling it mostly, but not all the time.
Okay. Yeah, I know it's coming soon. But you're right, on an ISP. I mean, obviously 443 is allowed most environments, for general web traffic. So I don't see a breakage happening there, because they're just sending your DNS traffic over 443. But I haven't really looked into, and we're not really going to talk about the browser side of things, because again, our focus is on the internal communication. But
I'm sorry. It actually does have an impact internally because you don't use the system local DNS servers to do the resolution for web traffic. So if you were to try and go to your Outlook or your OWA internal pages, or even external, that's going to get tunneled outside, and you're not going to get those service records, which is why they've done that, where you join a domain. If your computer is domain joined, that it doesn't use that, because it's going to pass that outside of your network to do the resolution. And you definitely need that internally for a lot of services on the web, like SharePoint, OWA, and things like that.
even if you have a DNS, not a resolver, what do they call it?
Basically, the browsers are ignoring your DNS settings locally on your server or on your workstation, which normally would be set to your Active Directory, and sending it outside your organization. Which
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So then, what is that query called?
So question about securing your DNS traffic, right? So if the claim about privacy is that we don't want the ISP or advertiser or whoever's collecting that data to be able to know the DNS query that we're making, and we're going to just encrypt that and send it to an endpoint, I assume that we have to trust that endpoint. It's going to go secure, but it's going to have to decrypt it and resolve it and send it back to us, right? So somebody's got to get that information somewhere along the way, correct?
Right. It's just like using a VPN.
Okay.
The VPN provider, the ABC VPN that you bought on Facebook for $3 for 19 years, they can know because they're decrypting at the end of the tunnel. So you're right. You're with DNS now. You're encrypting all your traffic to your DNS server. So if you're using Google as your DNS server, well, okay, you're not really benefiting here because you're giving Google all your DNS traffic, or Cloudflare or whoever it is.
And they do. There is the ability to set up your own HTTPS DNS resolver within your organization so that you can continue to get those log files. Because that is an important within a enterprise that you have that information available to you, and that provision is in there. And again, I'm pretty sure Firefox, if you're a domain join, you use the local DNS resolvers as opposed to the HTTPS ones out on the internet wherever they forward to.
Yeah, they had to have. I haven't. Again, I'm not focused on the internet for this presentation, but they had to have implemented something like that, if not from the backlash from the community, but or just from good design. But they can't just ignore internal DNS servers.
Oh yeah, absolutely, because then you wouldn't be able to get to intranet whatevercompany.com.
Right. But yeah, our intranet stuff is all, there is no .com. It's just HTTPS:// intranet, and it's just a DNS A record that points to some dumb server. So,
and that's why, and yeah, that's that configuration part. And I do think they've tried to mitigate that by default, but you always have issues.
Oh yeah, gotta love it. I can't think of what that is. Anyway, so yeah, you can do this. You can attempt to do this. Where did my mouse go? So with DNS, obviously, especially in your internal network, recursive, there it is, haha. So what Jeff's talking about is if your DNS client over here on Firefox, if it changes the DNS server to Cloudflare or something, then it's going to bypass this whole recursive DNS server that you would have internally, because typically in an environment, your internal DNS server is recursive. It's not authoritative out on the public space. So, for instance, in our agency, our internal DNS server is recursive. So it answers queries about other internal domain systems, other workstations, servers, whatever. If our recursive DNS server cannot answer that query, it will then forward it out to the authoritative DNS server that the state maintains for that is on the public World Wide Web, where they can answer that. When I query Google.com or Facebook or whatever, they can answer that query. But what Jeff's talking about, where you're bypassing all of that, so Firefox would then ignore your internal server to answer that query about your internal SharePoint server and effectively break it, because unless they build in that or already have built in that functionality that to recognize if you're a domain joint computer to not turn all this crap on. So internally, getting back to this, what you don't want is an internal attacker to spoof or attempt to respond to these DNS queries or even build their own DNS server. I think one, what was it? It might have been on a report where, if you've got IPv6 enabled, for instance, you're not using it, your switches, your routers are not responding to IPv6, but you can respond, your computers obviously by default are talking on IPv6. An attacker could stand up an IPv6 DNS server, and any IPv6 traffic, they could try to respond to it. So there is a concern here about an internal attacker seeing and disrupting that traffic and trying to spoof and get you to respond to those queries. So DNSSEC, again, it's authenticated but not encrypted. It is definitely recommended, but it adds security to the existing DNS protocol, but it is not DNS over SSL. And it's pretty well supported, and it's not impossible to implement unless you're in a state government, and it takes years and years and years. But it's definitely, if you can't do DNS over SSL, then it's definitely recommended as a stopgap.
It's also been floating around there as a thing that we're all going to move to since 1995.
Right. It's one of those things. It's been around forever, and Microsoft won't get off their butt and require us to do it, so we don't do it. And we
Right.
want to. We know it's good. We know it's better, but we can't get there because we're babysitting everyone else. So you can configure it. It's fairly straightforward. There's plenty of documentation about how to do that. You can do it. You can do a test zone. You can create a zone as a test, add some records, and test the entire process out without breaking your entire domain. So it's a worthwhile endeavor if you're going to try to secure something. And so something I mentioned earlier, and I didn't completely flesh out this slide, but I did want to troll Tim, and I'm pretty sure I stole this picture from Tim, and goes right back to what we've been saying all night, is these protocols, these secure methods have been around forever and ever and ever, and we just don't have time to implement them because we're all wearing so many hats and doing so many things. But there are so many things that we do and don't know about. I mentioned IPv6 is on by default on all Microsoft systems. Microsoft still to this day does not recommend disabling it, but at the same time they leave open systems available by default to be exploited. We found this out wonderfully. And I won't go into the details, but WPAD is an old web proxy auto discovery protocol. Sorry?
So old.
So old. Well, guess what? It's still on. It's still on by default. And if someone could answer let me say, I think I said that's right. If they attempt to send a DNS query and it fails, that's not quite right. I'm trying to remember the specifics of WPAD. Someone can basically, the client is trying to reach out to WPAD or can reach out to WPAD if it wants to. I forget the particulars, I apologize. But so it's client is trying to reach out over this, looking for a proxy, and if it finds one, it goes, "Oh, great! I feel so much better. I found a proxy. Thank you." and it will talk to it. So if an attacker gets in your environment and stands up a proxy that can respond to these requests, here you go, you're done. And that's a really terrible way to explain that, but the fact of the matter is this thing is still on by default. It's years and years and years and years and years old, so you want to get rid of it. NetBIOS is another one. It's been around forever. It's the previous iteration of DNS, and you don't want it. But turning it off is really, really difficult. There is no global GPO. Group policy is the #1 way to automate global changes in your environment and mass push them out. There is no policy available to this day, and probably never will be, to disable NetBIOS, because the only way to do it is to disable NetBIOS on the actual active NIC. And every NIC on a Windows computer has a unique GUID assigned to it. So it's relatively, if not truly impossible, to have a policy apply to this unique GUID of this NIC on your machine. So you either have to use PowerShell or startup script or something, or some combination of that to disable it. And it's an extreme nightmare and very, very difficult to get rid of. So good luck with that, but be aware that even if you're just using DNS, yeah, it's in clear text, but you can still fall back and have these other older protocols be used and exploited to take advantage of your network. So the last thing we'll talk about here is DNS over HTTPS. It's great for the internet. As Jeff was talking about earlier about Chrome and Firefox, I think Edge now, because Edge is Chromium and it's basically just Chrome with an Edge skin on it, all support this. I think Chrome is enabled for you can manually turn it on, and it sounds like Firefox is already turned on. Microsoft has no current plans to do this. A few months ago, even they're talking on one of their dev blogs about it. So again, DNSSEC is probably the best recommendation today for trying to secure this DNS traffic, and at least provide some authentication to your DNS instead of just pure blasting out in clear text. So that is all I've got. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, comments?
I have been directed to point out that a lot of the LDAPS stuff that we were talking about before, you don't necessarily need PKI for. If you are willing to load a cert from another trusted source, a source that is trusted within your domain, then you can make the LDAPS work without having to load certs on anything else. This doesn't net you any of the other stuff we were talking about, like IPsec tunnels across the domain. But if all you're concerned with is making LDAP work over TLS, then all you got to do is load the cert on the domain controller. At that point, it can act as a TLS server, i.e. a HTTPS server. So it can handle that LDAP over SSL traffic.
Yeah, and you can do that. You don't have to build a certificate authority. You can go to DigiCert and get a certificate.
Right.
But yeah, once you have a certificate, it's on. It's ready. It's just there. I mean, you can query it and it's available. So it's really not. That's not the difficult part. To turning all this on, the difficult part is converting everything over to use it.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, your standard Windows environment, you can have 90% of your environment using LDAPS purely by installing a certificate, 5 steps to, an easy recipe, but you're done. But for all the third-party printers or random software that somebody in HR bought that's querying your environment so they can get all the usernames and email addresses out of your Active Directory, that's the kind of crap that takes time and effort to go identify one and then actually get them to change it, if it can even support running on the secure protocol, the secure ports. Anybody else?
I don't see anything from the stream right now, but if anybody has any questions, please put them out there. We'll give it a few minutes and see.
Cool.
You're getting lots of love.
All right. Oh.
This was a very good talk, and it's very timely. There's so much going on out there, and Microsoft has gotten kind of the shaft in the long run about an approach to security, but they kind of started getting better about it, and then they've also kind of started taking a back seat and doing bad things again. So it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, unfortunately, their new CEO is 100% cloud, and so they're basically just saying, "Hey, move everything to Azure and forget all that old stuff. We don't need that old stuff anymore."
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because security in Azure is, in any cloud service, is subject to what you can actually get out of there, and logging isn't always the best. You don't always have the ability to send it to somewhere.
Yeah.
And it just turns out to be that even if they talk about having comprehensive logging, you don't necessarily have access to it easily, especially as a security person. Maybe as your cloud admin, you have access to it, but you can't delegate it to your security team.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother, probably multiple presentations. I've been arguing with Microsoft for months and months and months about, and I tell them, I said, I feel like, Microsoft, when we moved to Office 365, we were given domain admin in an environment that we have no training on, we know nothing about, we have no experience, we have no clue all the checkboxes and services and functionality that's available to us, and we don't know what the defaults are, we don't know what to expect. So I don't think Microsoft has learned anything from the relics of the past that we've just talked about, the old protocols that are still supported today. Nothing is going to change in the cloud. It's just in a different, somebody else's data center.
Yeah, exactly. And Azure AD, so apparently, even if your Active Directory is on site now and you use Office 365, they've instantiated your Active Directory in Azure Active Directory, and there are settings that can be changed there that you can't change from your on-prem situation.
Oh yeah, it's a mess. Like if you were a small business starting in a new business tomorrow, you obviously start in Office 365. You wouldn't go build a domain controller on premise, but you might have a fighting chance if you're starting fresh, 100% Office 365. But to go to migrate and be in hybrid mode, it's a nightmare. There's so many challenges to deal with just to get A and B talking to each other, let alone having everything secure and buttoned down, and like you said, your security guys have access and they're auditing and they're looking at logs. I mean, it's a completely different world, and there's so few tools and so few resources to figure it out. And we all still have to support all this old on-premise stuff. So, we're stretched so thin to manage now 2 massive environments. It's really, really, really impossible.
Absolutely. So we do have a question from the stream, and it's an important one. Does anybody have any toilet paper to spare? Pay good money.
Yeah, I hear it's going for high dollar on the street. So you might want to leave the house if you want to find some good. Well, there won't be good deals, but if you want to find some.
I'm not saying I'm charging 75 cents per sheet, but
Honestly, actually, I've had a couple reports on some Slack channels I'm at where they've had people stealing hand sanitizer from the office and got fired, and people stealing toilet paper from the office and got fired.
There have been reports that one of the people that I'm working with at the office has a spouse working in facilities at my employer, and yeah, the same thing is happening where people are stealing the toilet paper out of the bathrooms and stealing the hand sanitizer off the wall and taking it for home use, I suppose. It's a little frustrating, but what do you do?
It is. It's this dystopian future we live in right now.
A boring dystopia.
You don't need any toilet paper. Just use a water hose.
Good day to you, sir.
Look, if you guys let me work from home, I'd be happy to step straight from the toilet to the shower and let that be the end of it. But
There you go.
Okay.
This leads to
This was a really good presentation.
yeah.
it
Sorry.
was right up until then.
This leads to articles about home invasions for people stealing toilet paper and thereby getting harmed trying to do so.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, like that's where this goes if it keeps heading this way, I think.
I thought you were referring to an actual event that had happened.
No.
I'm glad that's just a theoretical.
I'm prophesizing.
Shout out to Lee, who is probably sitting in a lawn chair on his roof with a shotgun in hand, looking for toilet paper looters.
Get away from my TV.
Zombie apocalypse.
That's right.
It's toilet paper.
This would be great if your house got TP'd, though. I mean, just saying, like,
People throwing money at you.
Okay. This was a very fantastic virtual ColaSec. I think this was very successful. I appreciate everybody who tuned in tonight.
Yep.
And, we may have to do it again, but we'll see what happens moving forward. I think everybody from ColaSec wishes you safety and to be fed and to be in a good place. And if you need something from any of us in the community, please let us know. I think anyone would bend over backwards to try and help out while they can. So,
well said.
Absolutely.
No, Corey, if that is that, I don't see any questions in the except fly to Vegas for $30 and steal the toilet paper on the planes. I think that's the end of ColaSec for tonight.
Excellent.
thanks everybody for joining in.
Yep. Thank you all for coming, and stay safe out there. And if you need something, holler at us. You should have all of our personal emails.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.